Webster's Dictionary, one of the definitions of privacy is freedom from unauthorized intrusion. Within the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, citizens have the right to no unreasonable searches from the government. These two sources are frequently referenced by millions of Americans, but it seems as though neither the definition of privacy nor the supposed protections of the United States Constitution mean much to the U.S. government these days. Today I would like to take a look into some of the government's tactics to which the government is claiming is to prevent terrorism. The National Security Administration has developed a surveillance program which is authorized to screen every and any bit of information exchanged without the permission of those individuals being watched. What sounds like something that should be protecting the country and its citizens is actually violating civil liberties and our natural privacy rights. Does anyone have a Facebook here? How about a cell phone? Just about every one of us does. I know I actually have both. We love to keep our friends and family updated about our lives through Facebook and snapping pictures and sending text messages and on the phone. What's awesome about that is that you get to maintain your privacy through a login and a password. You actually get to maintain how much information you want to show the public and how much information you want to just show your friends. Well, it seems today that those luxuries that were once offered for our privacy are actually being taken from us today. Social media is one of the many targets that will not require your authorization for the NSA to go surfing through any and all information that you choose to exchange privately and or publicly, costing many Americans their private lives. Wiretapping, which is also known as surveillance, is nothing new because it started out back in the late 1800s. One author by the name of David Price actually begins to discuss the practices of wiretapping in the early 20th century. That was during the First World War. Congress actually had to outlaw wiretapping because it became so commonplace. Although national security was at risk, they still outlawed the practice. But it seems as though today the government doesn't look at wiretapping in the same way they did before. What was once a thing of the past has now become commonplace here in the United States, as the NSA has chosen to place all phone calls, text messages, emails, and or any other means of communication or transfer of information is up for grabs for the NSA to look at. According to one journalist, Joe Wolverton, the state of Utah will actually be housing the largest filing cabinet here in the United States, which is the Utah Data Center. The Utah Data Center will be able to house at least 5 zettabytes of data. Zettabytes is the equivalent to 250 million DVDs. Now that's an enormous amount of information that can be used and abused by complete strangers without the actual permission of the person whose information it belongs to. It is understandable that the government will want to ensure the country's safety, and taking the proper precautions is always necessary. But it does not seem that it is very realistic the way the United States is choosing to protect the United States from actual terrorism. The NSA has actually been accused, according to Jonathan Strait, who is a teacher of computational journalism at the Columbia University, of not necessarily acting within its limits, legal limits. The NSA domestic surveillance program has been found to violate legal standards on more than one occasion. Strait actually points out a specific event, which was in 2009, when the Justice Department acknowledged that the NSA had collected emails and phone calls of Americans in a way that exceeded legal limitations. With the acknowledgement of our own Justice Department, it is difficult to understand what exactly NSA's motives may be for this actual surveillance program. The next violation is actually our Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. When interpreted correctly, in the case of domestic surveillance, this should mean that all citizens will not be subjected to surveillance unless deemed absolutely necessary with probable cause. Unfortunately, the government no longer looks at the Constitution or the Fourth Amendment in a way as a reference to when they choose to make laws. The United States Constitution is merely advisory at its best. Both the current president and the previous president have both stated that they do not acknowledge the United States Constitution as anything more than just advisory. And even those in support of the domestic surveillance program feel they are unclear about what exactly the United States is up to. Americans' lives, rights, and privacies have gone to bat and are continuously striking out to protect our country from terrorists that do not seem to be getting caught. Privacy is like gold to Americans and is not worth giving up. Unless you're a soldier or a prisoner who's used to showering in front of other Americans, in front of others, Americans are literally stripped and forced to share their business with others due to this surveillance program. All of this is used to find one terrorist that they are not so sure of. You're fishing through millions and millions of information, and who knows if you'll be able to even find it. As I wrap up this discussion, I would like to leave you with a few words from Mr. Neil Richards, who's actually a law professor at Washington University, who compares the current situation in which the United States is sitting in to right now to movies and books who predicted the issue actually going to happen. Mr. Richards states, from the Fourth Amendment to George Orwell's 1984 and from the Electronic Communications Privacy Act to films like Minority Report and The Lives of Others, our law and culture is full of warnings about state scrutiny of our lives. Thank you for your time.
If there's one thing that you can change, what would you change about this whole surveillance thing?
I think that they should be able to present reasons for why they choose to go through certain people's information. So I think that they should let them know that they're actually going to be going through their information before they do it, just like they do now with warrants. You know, they can't search through a person's house without a warrant or probable cause.
So do you feel that it's okay for the government to surveillance prior offenders rather than civilians, or should that apply to both?
I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if it's a rapist that's getting surveillance for, you know, child molesting or possible child molestation, then yeah, I think I think when you violate the law the first time, that you kind of lose some of those privileges that people who abide by the law have. But it just kind of depends.